Hey everybody, Texas Stroker here, Lance's Performance Shop, Lone Star Mopars.com. Monday night, got off work at a decent time, figured I'd crank some videos out, and based on what you see here, do you have any idea what's about to happen? There might be some hints, but long story short, this is KC Tool Haul number 24. This one was based off of a tool of the day from November 12th, and we've got everything here ready to go. So what we're going to do first is going to tie in with what you see at the top of the frame here, and it's going to be from Gedore. So this is something when I first found KC Tool, this is one of those things that sat there sort of at the top of the page. I was like, man, that's awesome. I really want to have that. And I never picked it up until recently. Now, something important to note for the month of November, not sure when you'll see this, but there's a promotion with Gedore where you save 10% off of anything, and I felt like that and needing to get free shipping off the tool of the day made this a worthwhile pickup, and it is right here. This is it. This, you probably, if you've been on their site, you've seen the same pair of pliers and probably thought the same thing, like, man, you know, you probably had a couple of things in mind where that would have been awesome, or you can think of uses where you would use this instead of standard pliers. That's the same boat I was in. I finally purchased these things after all this time. What, 24 tool hauls it took to bring them in, but I finally did it. And this is their part number GR2276585, and you can also find it under 8248 160 JC. JC is going to be basically indicative of their comfort grip, the black and the blue that you see here and there. So this kind of completes the trio for me. We've got their pliers wrench in this handle, and then we've got these two here. So we've got our cutters, we got our combination pliers, and now we've got these suckers. And I gotta say, they feel really good in hand. Typically not a lot of break-in with these. You can kind of see there's like some rough spots that over time will kind of, you know, come to be. But this is just one of those things. I can think of numerous situations where I wish I would have had something, whether I'm coming in from the side like this and it's just an ergonomic thing, or if I'm having to hold a pin in place or kind of keep tension on something while I work with this hand. This would have been super freaking nice to have had in those scenarios. Similarly, if you're coming in just at a weird angle or you're going down, that's nice. It's kind of easier to use this, in all honesty, than it is to just fish with the pliers in that manner. And the other big thing is just coming in, you can kind of reverse gun this and you can maintain things in that order. So if you had to wrench on something and torque it with an off position. But the ones that I got, and this is true story, that's one of the things I saw very first and wanted it immediately. This is one that I brought in fairly recently from NWS. It's a similar concept. It's kind of got the locking feature as well, you know, to differentiate itself. But I told you I was going to try to use these exclusively just to see what I thought of them. I've only gotten to use them like 5 or 6 times since I had them, but they've not been that bad. It's kind of one of those things, you know, like particularly if you were just doing the same task over and over, repetitive motion, if you will, I think that's where you would benefit, you know, from an offset pair, you know, as opposed to having to come in like this. That's not a very natural, you know, when you're coming in here, whether you're flush cutting something, whether you're grabbing a nut and torquing it, whether you're holding tension or pulling a wire. I don't know what you would be doing, but this is not a natural position to do all day long. Now, one that would be a natural position is like this, when you basically have your wrist upright. And it's one of those things that's hard to explain, but if you ever tax yourself in that manner, you could see where this would come in handy. So essentially, with the addition of these angled pliers, I've accomplished 2 things. I've gotten one of the things that I wanted since I first have been on KC Tool, and we've also completed a pretty sweet trio of pliers there from Gedore. So pretty happy with that. And again, what I will do is I'll try to use these as well. When I have a situation where I would typically use something like this, I'm going to come in, and for the time being, I'm going to try to exclusively use these offset ergo ones and see what we think of them. So we'll leave it at that, and I guess this is a great segue to come in with. This is also something that I had wanted to bring in and try for a really long time, and with needing free freight and similarly needing to go ahead and take advantage of the 10% that we have this month, I thought, what better time than now to go ahead and finally do it. And the good news is these aren't super expensive anyway. But this is from Gedore. This is their L-Boxx, but it's the mini one. That's right, the mini. 1102L, I think, would pull it up for you. Price for this sucker was $17.21. All that is before the discounts and everything. But if you'll note, this is the small one. I've not seen videos on the little guy. I've seen, I think German Tool Reviews covered their big one, which is something I've contemplated bringing in. It's like $95 though. I've held off thus far. But if that thing was like, I don't know, $24.99, I might even consider $50 okay. But maybe if I had it in person or could see it in person firsthand type of a deal, I don't know. But this one's not that bad of a setup, and I do have things in mind for it. So first thing to note, you've got the Gedore branding up top. You've got the L-Boxx Mini. I think online and in their catalog, this handle was actually shown to be blue. It is black here. There's the date code. Let me pull this up here. It looks like 19. This might have actually been made in February of this year, so they must sell quite a few of these things. Flipping it around, you've got LB Mini, another date code sample. They will stack and latch. That's actually a real spring in there. I think you can kind of see the metallic piece, right? Sort of, down in that hole. So that's sort of cool. It's not just relying on the tension of the plastic, which, as you know, anything plastic over time will stress, will fatigue, will crack, and will fail. So that's a pleasant little surprise. Now opening it up, which is really hard to do with my broken thumb. Lid is actually much heavier than I thought it would be, which is cool. It looks like we're going to have positive dividing up here. Case in point, you know, if you have, say, heat shrink fittings in here for 12, 14, 16, 18, whatever it might be, they might jump around if this doesn't seal well at the top. But given where this reinforcement is here, where my thumb is at, I think it should alleviate that and eliminate it. You can pull this very easily. So say that we had long runs of heat shrink tubing that we wanted over here. That would work well for us. If you can't tell, that's kind of what I have in mind for this thing. Electrical stuff. So fuses, heat shrink, butt connectors, things along those lines. I've actually picked up some pretty big terminal sets for open barrel stuff, and their plastic containers suck. And I was thinking I might try this. The downside, since it is small, we only have 6 maximum dividers. Like, there's no plastic pieces. We can come in and make that have 4 slots instead of 2. It is what it is. Now, technically, if you want to make it smaller, I mean, if we had just crud tons of heat shrink, we could run it that way and we just had 2 terminals, something along those lines. But you can work with it any way you want to, apparently. Or, of course, just pull everything. For example, if I were to come in here and take all of these dividers out, we could just store our pliers in it, and it would actually work quite well for that. Now, it would kind of be stupid, but it would certainly be an option. Sockets, since we have some handy, I mean, those would drop in if you're just trying to build something compact to keep in your car, or maybe a motorcycle type of a deal. It's be a little big for that, but I guess if your saddlebags are big enough, it'd be worth it. You kind of get the idea. Your options are limitless. It comes down to what you personally want to do. Now, the one thing that has concerned me is back here on the lid. There is absolutely no metal pin, there's no hinge pin, there's nothing. It is solely relying on the plastic. And it's also a design I've not really seen much of. You've got 2 divided tabs here that drop down and slide through from said lid. And, I can already predict that when this fails, which with plastic, you know, it's just kind of a matter of time in most cases, and we might be pleasantly surprised by this, but if you're constantly in and out of this, or if it's being subjected to, you know, vibrations or getting jostled around somewhere where it's not anchored well, I think your failure is going to be on the lid. Now, the good news is it could conceivably fail back there, and you could still maybe latch it in place and it just wouldn't flop up from there, or maybe you could tape it. But bottom line, this is something I'd always wanted to try. It wasn't priced too crazy. I didn't want to start with a ginormous one and have to bear that expense, so I figured I'd start small, see what I thought of it, take it from there. And what I want to do now, keep in mind this probably translates best to metric measurements, but we're going to call that 10 1/4. So 10 1/4 wide is going to be our profile overall, not just the bins inside. That's going to be slightly less. The rough measurement here for the side to side, we're going to come up top. Don't know that you can see that. Dead on at 6 inches. In fact, let's flip it over. That'll provide nice contrast. We'll go to the wide point. Again, pretty much 10 1/4. And then our height, which is kind of funky, we'll go, I guess, here, because it sort of elaborates on it all. Between 2 1/4, 2 1/2, somewhere in that range. So again, you're limited capacity-wise by the height primarily. But for the things I referenced, I think it would work really, really well. Another thing I considered was like AN fittings. Currently, though, I use a lot of Plano stuff, you know. This, for example, is from American Auto Wire. It's a pretty nice container, but there's just so many open barrel terminals in there, and then like bulkhead pieces. I need to make a video on this, actually. I've just not had time. But stuff like that, and this one's done really well, where it's got the index and the part number so you can reorder everything like that. It's not always like that, and when you run into situations where this plastic container sucks, it makes your life not enjoyable, and subsequently, something like this could be the solution. Now, what I've been having pretty good luck with, I can't remember if I made a video on this or not, but these are from Stanley. Milwaukee has something real similar. It's almost like an old school Plano box, but they're like $24.99, and you can usually catch them on sale for considerably less. But like, this is the carburetor one, right? So I mean, back here I've got like kick down linkages, which you can't really see. We've got brass fittings. I've got the anodized clamps. I've got power valve selections. I've got hose clamps. I've got all kinds of alcohol-based stuff for accelerator pumps. I've got jets. Pretty much anything that I wanted to throw in here. I've got fuel clamps, you know, like the, you know, body-to-line type stuff. I've got the fancy Earl ones. I've got a couple of AN fittings in here. It's when you can get this for $25, and it's got way more storage space, height-wise, width-wise, length-wise, everything. It's kind of hard pill to swallow to come in and buy these smaller ones. But if you have something specific that you're working with, where the footprint would tie in well here, I think this is a very viable solution. I'm excited to use it, see if the lid fails on me, which I hope it doesn't, and see what I want to do with it. Now, again, the other thing, you could, you know, grab like 2 of these. You could get screwdrivers of common size. You could get some pliers. You could probably fit, in all honesty, 3/8 drive ratchet and sockets if you wanted to. In fact, if we just pulled these 2, we could have a 3/8 ratchet, and then we could have even deep sockets would fit like that, and you could stack them up. You can do a lot with these, really, is what it comes down to. You could divide your hex bits, Torx bits, you know, whatever. It's really is limitless. And I gotta say, initially, I am impressed. I do think these could be sold a little less than that. I realize it's probably an issue because it's imported. I don't know if Sortimo is who makes these, or if this is something else. I'm sure one of you will know. But again, my biggest concern right now is just the hinge mechanism, which is typical of most things. But we'll see what we think of it. So with that, we've taken a look at these funky little pliers that have been on my wish list literally since day one. We've finally brought in an L-Boxx. Granted, it's a mini, but it's got lots of possibilities. It is now time for the tool of the day. If you can't figure out from what this is, you've probably thought, well, you haven't really used the sockets and extensions much. And there's another item here that's not been talked about. That's where we're going to tie in. So this is from Hazet. It was the tool of the day again on November 12th. The price was $27.99, which, I'm not gonna lie, I feel like that should be about half that price too. But again, I realize it's imported, and it's kind of hard to find good quality tools like this. So if you haven't figured it out yet, this is what we haven't talked about. That is from Stavilla. It is a 1/4 drive spinner handle. I absolutely love the thing, and you're thinking, well, hey, if you like it and you wanted to get something else or other sizes, why didn't you just buy it? I don't know that Stavilla makes a 3/8 drive spinner handle, and that's in fact the sole reason I haven't brought one in from them. And if you haven't determined what we've done, tool of the day was this Hazet 3/8 drive spinner handle. Now, you're thinking, okay, what's a spinner handle? What are you doing with that? Well, if you don't recall, number one, you can think of it as basically, if you're on a budget and you had this and you had a socket set, you basically created your own nut drivers at that point in time. So if your socket set runs from 5mm up to 19mm in 3/8 drive, you've got nut drivers. Same thing with SAE. If you've got 1/4 to 15/16 3/8 drive sockets, you've got a nut driver for each one. Granted, you're going to have to build it yourself, but it saves some money. It eliminates the need to have dedicated tools if you're on a budget. This one I've absolutely loved. The big thing I like to do with it, regardless of how nice, how cheap, how expensive your ratchet might be, if we've got, like a 2.5-inch bolt, okay, and it's threaded, we'll just say it's a shoulder bolt, goes all the way up, even if it's not. If it's, just got like a 1/4 or, length of thread, whatever it might be, you have to come in with the ratchet, and you're just going to spin the ratchet around. That's why I have that speed handle from Heiko that I talked about, This is manual stuff, of course. If you're using an impact, it's a different story, but where this would come in handy, if I'm going to come in here and we have this Craftsman 5/8 socket, right? I couple it together. It's got pretty decent fitment, I would say. Instead of me having to, sit there and ratchet, I can come in and I can spin this thing down. And then we come in, we pull the socket, we go to our ratchet, and we tighten it up. If it's a torqued application, we take this, we go to the torque wrench, and we torque her down. If this is a deal where it's a bolt that we've got to take out of place, we've got our breaker bar or our ratchet, we spin it free, and then or break it free, I should say, and then I can come in with this, and I can just go to town and get it up much, much quicker. Not everyone uses these, not everyone likes them. I am the type of person that does. And so that's what we're doing here with it. But that was a 5/8 socket. Right here, this is what? Performance Tool, once again. Their extension. Gonna plug it on again. If we had, let's say, a 3/8 nut driver, okay, or 1/4, 5/16, whatever it might be, we're going to be limited to that shaft length, which is typically going to be like 4-5 inches, maybe we'll say. And what if it's like a long reach thing? You're going to have to go to an extension. This is another application where the spinner handle comes in quite beautifully as a fill-in tool, because we can then couple, we'll assume that that's, our 1/4-inch nut driver. We've got the extension ability that you don't have with a standard nut driver, so it works in that sense as well. That paired beautifully. In this case, we've got a great neck. Gotta love my AutoZone pickups from when I was back in high school. 3/8 drive. We can come in here. That actually might pair the tightest, interestingly enough, and you can go to town driving hex, torques, whatever it might be, specialty stuff. If you've got a 3/8 drive socket, you can go to town with it. Now, this is again from Hazet. I think they do have this in 1/4 as well, maybe even 1/2 inch, I'm not sure. They're not near as common in 1/2 inch drive. Typically you don't deal with long runs of thread for most things. There are certain applications where that would be the opposite, but I have loved this one. This is probably one of my favorite purchases, honestly, as weird as that might seem. But that right there is not just a quick release, it's a lock. So where we pull that off, this would actually be locked down until I press that and release the detent. This thing has been awesome. I've used it on quite a few projects. It's not disappointed me. I like the ergonomics of it. Again, I personally like the 3K line a little better than their standard handle. Most people seem to prefer, but I've had zero issues with that. I would have bought a 3/8 one, but I don't think they make it. This was on Tool of the Day. I also am the type, I like to compare things. I like to say, okay, well, do I like Hazet or do I like Stavilla better in terms of spinner handles? I'm going to go ahead and go to town with this one. Something of note, you can see the design difference here. With the Stavilla, we've got, a shaft coming down before we have the drive. With this, it's almost just like it's machined out from the handle, and then we've got the 3/8 drive. There's also no lock on it. Again, I think a lot of that probably has to do with Stavilla being like more aviation, centered, if you will. But initially, it's not terrible. It is a little small, in my opinion. Again, this is subjective. Some of you might say it's perfect. A few of you might say it's oversized, right? So I would love to see that just slightly bigger. I think would have been nice for me. Case in point, that's 1/4 drive. I realize, there's torque and people don't want, mad at the tool because you shear something off. But this, I feel like, would be a great size for a 3/8 spinner handle if they were to make one. I think that number 2 Phillips would be perfect. If we hold the Hazet up to it, you can kind of see the size difference. It's nothing major, it's just a little extra meat, and since this is tapered, it's best seen with the green kind of at the edges. That's just personal preference, but the bottom line, I'm going to use that. It's literally my only 3/8 spinner handle, so anytime I want to drive something down with 3/8 stuff, that's what we're going to use. So we'll quickly learn whether we like it or not. But if I had to say which one would I like, assuming these were both available in both sizes, I'd go with the Stavilla personally. That said, I haven't gotten to use this one. Maybe I'll come around to it. We shall see over time. Why is that not focused? I couldn't tell you. But that is what we brought in. That is it for this tool haul. We got the funky wishless pliers, which I think we'll actually have a pretty good use with. We've got our Hazet 3/8 spinner handle, and we got this pretty cool, pretty useful Gedore L-Boxx. So I'm happy with what we brought in. Let me know your thoughts. On that note, if you liked what I was wearing here to protect you from having to look at my thumb, which is, I think, slightly improving. I don't know that the nail is going to come in like it should have, because I think there might be like a gash under the nail that no one knew was there. Long story, but these are from Alpha Gloves, alphagloves.us. Check out what they've got. If you want to make an order, use the discount code Lone Star at checkout. You will save a pretty good chunk of money. That's what I'm going to tell you. We've got the KC Tool Bit of Thanks checklist, which that reminds me, got number 13 out of 24, which I'm sure some of you by this point in time know exactly what it is. Titanium coated, yes. Torx, yes. T20, that's what it is. So from my previous one, though, we got 15, which is a little bit more rare. That's a T30. That means we can safely assume the T, or the number 14, would be a T25, and I would not mind at all having a surplus of those. But down below in the description, I will have a link to the forum. We spec out what those are. If you've got one, if you've got a bit that you don't see listed there and you want it to be listed, let me know. I will get it added as time allows, and I will, of course, give you credit for your contribution. That said, Gedore, they've still got the 10% through the end of the month. Maybe I'll try to post some pictures on Instagram or something to remind you. With that said, I do hope you enjoyed. If you've used these funky pliers, the Hazet and the Stavilla spinner handle, which one do you prefer? What do you use these for? Do you find yourself reaching for them more and more, or do you just not adjust to the ergonomics of them and you go with traditional, even though it might be like less comfortable in the long run? And also for the L-Boxx people, how do they hold up for you? What are you doing with them? What sizes do you prefer? Have you had any issues with the hinges failing on the lids? Let me know your thoughts on that as well. But with that said, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Links, as always, down below in case you want to pick this stuff up. Make sure you're following along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. With that said, I'm going to head inside, make myself some supper, and watch the Mavericks and Spurs tonight. So I hope you enjoyed. I will catch y'all back here in the next one.